Hello everybody, welcome back to Robotics for All, Week 7. I'm excited to announce that you have only 1 week left until you're officially HTML and CSS masterminds. Moving on, up till now, we've really only worked on the design of our website, but we've never given it any functionality. For example, in this web page, you can see that there's a button to turn on the light and turn off the light. And really, in any professional web page, for example, Google, or even in this Amazon.com, this product right here, you can see that there's a way to interact with the website, right? With these buttons, add to cart, buy now, and you can also see that when I click on these buttons, the left side, these pictures kind of update with the button that I want to click. So that's an example of the interactability that you can see in your web page. Moving on, how can we actually add this interactability to our web page? In addition to HTML and CSS, there's another language called JavaScript, which is essentially a scripting language that allows us to add the functionality. So to complete the last piece of our puzzle, HTML is what gives us structure, CSS is what gives us a style, and finally JavaScript is what gives us interactability and functionality. To start off, go ahead and delete the tags that are unnecessary for right now. So in this case, we have the script tag and these meta tags. Now, make sure to not delete the link tag because you guys have already learned what the link tag is. In the script tag, or in the body, go ahead and write the script tag like this. And actually, not in the body tag. Go ahead and write it in the head tag. The body tag is for the actual element of our web page, not the functionality. Then, in the body tag, add a button tag. This is how we're going to connect the JavaScript to the HTML. So button, and make sure to have a slash, and let's add something inside the button. So click me. Go ahead and run it. You'll see that a button pops up, a gray button with the text click me. If you go ahead and click it, you'll see that absolutely nothing happens, and that's because we have not connected the button with our JavaScript yet. So let's try to fix that. In the script tag, go ahead and write the following. Function write text with a pair of parentheses followed by a pair of brackets, open and close. Then inside the brackets, go ahead and write alert and whatever text you want to alert. So in this case, I'm going to write you press the button. Then, in order to hook up this function with our button so that it'll be called, inside the button tag, write onClick, which is an attribute of the button, equal to, and whatever the name of the function is. So write text. So if I run it, and let's wait until it properly runs. There we go. So if I go ahead and click it, nothing happens. Oh, there we go. Just a little malfunction. So if I go ahead and run it and click it, you can see that it says you press the button, just like we alerted. So now let's take a look at what we actually did. In the JavaScript, we wrote a function, which is essentially like a block of code that has multiple lines in it that we can run. The function name, which is what we used inside of here, and finally whatever line of code we wanted to write, which is essentially this alert statement that will give you a window alert. Then inside the button, we connected the function with the onClick. So in short, whenever the person clicks it, so on the click of this button, we should call this function. That's what our button is essentially doing. So because this course is only about HTML, is pretty much about HTML and CSS, and not so much about JavaScript, we will not be covering the in-depth about what JavaScript, the really in-depth stuff about what JavaScript can do. For right now, we are only going to cover the very, very basic or tip of the iceberg of JavaScript. And we're only going to focus on buttons and how we can change certain properties of our web page and perform certain simple tasks. So let's take this a step further. Why don't we try changing the background color? I'm going to go ahead and write body in the body tag, give it an ID. So ID equal to body tag. And you can really call it anything you want. Does not matter. So then once you've written your body or your ID, write another function. So function change background color. And whoops, change background color. And then in order to change the background color, we can do document.get element by ID. And then the name of our tag dot style dot background color and equal to and whatever color we want. In this case, the background color or this quotes will take either an alphabetical color or even like a numerical color. For example, your hexadecimal values. So if I go ahead and put a semicolon here, make sure you put a semicolon here, and then I change the on click of our button. Actually, in fact, why don't we add another button? So this one will be the name of the function, right? So I'm just going to call it change BG color. BG stands for background color. So then in your on click, make sure to change the function, and if you run it, there should be another button pop up, and it's going to change your background color to blue. So one more time, the first button gives you an alert. Second button, you can see, will change the background color. Let's observe the code. In the function, you can see that we started off by writing document. The document right here allows us to access our body tag. It gives JavaScript access to whatever elements it needs to change. Then we have .get element by ID. This is one way that we can specifically access. This is one way that we can access a specific tag using an ID of the element. So in this case, I access the body tag by giving this function a name, the name of the tag, or the name of the ID for the body, and that way I was able to get the body tag. Then after I wrote .style, which essentially says to access to object styling, or like CSS, right? And then after that, I said a specific property I want, background color. So that's like the recipe if you want to change really any property of an element. So let's try changing a different property. What if you wanted to change the font color of a heading? I'm going to go ahead and add a heading here. And I'll give it an ID of heading. And I will close it. And let's write, this is a heading, or whatever text you want to include. Then, after you've written your heading tag, add another function. We're going to call this one function change font color. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it because it is going to be very similar. All right, so we have document.get element by ID. In this case, the ID is heading. Then .style, and instead of .background color, all we're going to say is .color, and let's just change it to blue or to red. So I'm going to finish off by adding one more button. Remember to change the on click, and then finally change font color. So if you run the code, a heading will pop up, right? This is a heading, and if I press the code, it should hopefully change the font color. And you can see, and I'll do it again, if you press the button, now the font color is red instead of black. And all these buttons work the same way, so if I said change background color, it will change the background color, and same thing with the font color. Okay, why don't we try doing one last property, something that you could probably add to your website that you guys are building. This is trying to display and hide text. I'm going to go ahead and write a function called turn off. And essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how we can hide a certain element of in our HTML. So once again, write a function here. In this case, I'm going to write document.get element by ID. I'm just going to reuse the heading .style .display this time, because we're trying to access the display of our element, and then none. What this allows us to do is completely get rid of, or completely make the element hide as if it wasn't there in the first place. So I'm going to add a button that should turn it off. So button right here, turn off. Let's just say hide heading. So if I run this right here, it should create another button. So if I change the font color and then I hit hide heading, and if I press hide heading, you can see that now it's completely gone. So in your website, maybe you could have a button that will display text for you, or display text for you and turn it back on. So what if you wanted to turn it back on? So we could add another function, turn on. And essentially, it's going to be the opposite of our turn off function. So if we wanted to get something to display again, instead of putting none, all we have to do is put block. So I write block here, and then I add another button that's essentially going to do the opposite. So I will go ahead and copy and paste this. Turn on. Display heading. And if I go ahead and run it, if I hide the heading, it will hide it. And hopefully, if I display the heading, if I press this button right here, yep, you can see that now the heading is back on. So hide heading, display heading. That's another property that maybe you could try to implement in your website. But what if you wanted to only use one button instead of using two buttons? I will show you the following code that will allow you to do that. In this case, don't worry about the fact that you may not or probably will not understand all the code in this example. That's okay, because this is just a beginner JavaScript, and it is not necessary to learn all of it to be able to use it. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and write or delete these two functions. It's up to you whether you want to add another one or delete it, but just for the sake of space, I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to delete one button and make this other button say toggle heading. So and we're going to say I'm going to say in the function the same thing, toggle heading. And then I'm going to add a function called toggle heading, and with some brackets, and I'm going to add actually, I'm going to first add a variable right here, or I'm going to add this text at the top. So on line 8, or right below the script tag, go ahead and write toggle, or var toggle, and then true. And once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and actually put the text at the top and give it some space because it'll be easier to look at. Toggle heading, and if toggle equal to false, I'm going to go ahead and say document.get element by ID heading .style .display equal to none. Why don't we try that much for now? Let's see if it works. And actually, why don't we set this equal to false, not true? So I have this, and there you go. You can see that when I press toggle heading, it turned it off. Now we have to figure out how we can make it turn it on. So I'm going to have another thing, an else, E-L-S-E. I'm going to say document with the opposite. So document.getElementById at heading dot cell dot display block, or not there yet. Yeah, block. Then after you write the else, write toggle equal to not toggle. So sorry, not I meant toggle equal to exclamation mark toggle. So if I go ahead and run it, if I press toggle heading, it'll turn it off. And if I press toggle heading again, it will turn it on. So that is a basic JavaScript introduction covered. Today, we discussed how we can change properties with document.getElementById. Remember that this is used to access a certain element. And we also learned how we can write functions. And finally, how we can hook up those functions to buttons to actually display the changes that, or actually display the JavaScript code that we wrote. In this case, the background color, font color, or even the toggle heading. At this point, I encourage you to go and look up a CSS properties list. Try to mess around with whatever properties you want to mess around with, and figure out things and figure out what you can add to your website to make it even cooler. At this point, good luck and bye.